So if the question is, why do you make music? For me, I think the best answer is because music provides a way to tell stories that are universally relatable among people who come from different backgrounds and who have very different life experiences. Stories about love, joy, anger, happiness, hate, whatever the case may be, touch the human spirit deeply and in ways that everybody experiences. And music just sort of provides that space where that connectedness, that commonality, brings people together and demonstrates that however wacky or fractured the world might seem at any point in time, we all really are a lot more alike than we are different, and I just think that's cool. Music's a great way to sort of get at that. When it comes to process, for me, songwriting is almost always about starting with a catchy word or phrase that grabs me somehow, emotionally. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I was hanging out with a buddy, a longtime friend, who was going through a bit of a rough spot in his marriage. Now, anybody who's ever been in a long-term relationship understands that there are always ups and downs. What Hallmark movies and the Lifetime TV channel would tell you is that when the downs start to outnumber the ups, you need some sort of huge life-changing event, like quitting your job, moving to Vermont, and opening an inn, or spiriting your loved one away on some tropical adventure where something big and profound happens that's going to immediately recenter the two of you and bring you back to a good place. Well, in real life, for most of us, that's just not a possibility, and it doesn't happen that way. So as I sat there with my friend that evening, trying to figure out how am I going to give him some words of encouragement or maybe some, pass along something useful, I found myself trying to evaluate of the couples I've known over the 30, 35 years I've been a grown-up and married, and other couples I've watched sort of weather bumpy waters. It seemed to me the difference between people who made it and people who did not didn't have anything to do with that one-time big gesture. Rather, it was lots of little gestures a lot of the time, as a habit. So later on, or in an effort to offer him, a couple of words, I found myself verbalizing this. I said, you guys got married forever ago. You promised for better or worse. Maybe all you need is a little less of, the worse and a little more of the better. And on the ride home, it occurred to me, I thought, that could be a good song lyric. There's something relatable about that. So when I got home, I went in the basement in here, picked up my guitar, and did what I sometimes do, and started noodling around with the chord progression. And I eventually landed on this. What we're searching for, you can't buy in a store. No fairy tales or perfect weather. Just a little less worse, a little more better. And there you had it. Bam, that's that centerpiece. It's a catchy little short phrase. It's a centerpiece of the story I would like to tell that I think is relatable, and it has room to build context around it. So now that I have my storytelling centerpiece of the song, which ideally will evolve into the hook, that musical or lyrical component that hopefully makes the song memorable and unique. The rest of the process involves filling in the storyline and structure in a way that supports and provides context for that central musical phrase or theme. It's also the point where the process, at least for me, goes from relying on creativity and inspiration to being much more mechanical in how you approach the remainder of the task. I start with the assumption that I will have 3 or 4 verses, maybe a break, maybe not, to tell the story in. For each verse, I'll write out some short sentences or phrases that move the story forward. Now, importantly, at this juncture, I'm doing so with absolutely no thought or reference at all to rhyming or musical phrasing or anything like that. At this point, it's just about the story. For example, in the weeks leading up to my son's wedding, I have an adult son who got married several months ago. I was really moved watching my wife make the emotional journey in the weeks and months prior to that wedding, that started from a place that kind of went, oh my gosh, my son's leaving the nest, and eventually wound up in a place that was much more, I'm so glad my boy found somebody that's going to love him as much as I do. And it was just a really cool and emotional thing to watch. So as I'm running through in my mind sort of a little video of what I think the wedding is going to look like, I always have a pen and a scratch pad or a word processor close by, and I just jot down sentences, things that I see in that little play that's sort of going on in my head. In this case, I wrote down, cute little girl sprinkles flower petals down the aisle. Son smiles as his bride steps into his view. Wife squeezes my hand, saying without words how grateful she is that our son found a person who loves him as much as we do. And then with that little shell of a story down on paper, I open up an online thesaurus and a rhyming dictionary, and then I simply start meandering around through vocabulary looking for words or phrases that catch my attention and relate to the overall storyline. I do this with a focus on trying to condense as much as possible, be as sparing as possible in your use of words. I try to use evocative imagery and references and metaphors rather than clinical, literal descriptions of what I see going on in the play in my mind. And then in this case, after an hour or so, just noodling around, making some changes, I wound up with a lyric that goes like this.
Petals are scattered, his young bride to know. The look on his face is what I already know. They were made for. She's what I prayed for. I hope there's a little room for me. His whole world.
Well, what you probably picked up on right away was about the only thing I added to that clip you just heard was the lyrics and the guitar in the background and sort of the general melody. I'm not an instrumentalist or a vocalist. I'm blessed to have friends and family in my life who are and who routinely donate their abundant talents when I want to record the song and release it out into the universe. So that's what you heard going on there. Back on process. During the writing process, I also try and slow down from time to time and dedicate some thought to figuring out how I want the content of the story to flow. I like songs that involve some sort of twist or turnaround as the story unfolds, something that makes the listener glad he or she stuck around to the end of the song. You can hear what I'm talking about in terms of lyrical choice and flow if you play the remainder of the track from which that brief excerpt was taken. If you listen to the whole song, the first two verses sort of suggest to the listener the song's about a woman whose husband left her for somebody else. And then the big aha moment comes at the break when you find yourself going, wait, what did he just say? Wait, this song isn't about her husband leaving her, it's about her son getting married. It's not a sad song about people drifting apart. It's really a heartfelt celebration about the goodness that happens when people come together. The lyrics at the break sort of set the stage and make you go, what? And then the final verse sort of brings you full circle back around to a good place. And that's kind of how I like to do it. So that's my approach to songwriting. Number one, settle on a central theme that's expressed in a short, memorable phrase. Number two, decide what story you want to tell about the central theme. And then number three, tell it in a way that takes the listener on a journey that ends up in a good place. Now, I recognize that what works for me in this particular genre, which probably lands somewhere between folk, singer-songwriter, and maybe light country, may not work as well in other themes. This just happens to be one that works well, I think, for me and in this genre. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you've got any feedback or comments you're willing to share, or if you'd like a little more info about how to take that song you've completed and it's now on a piece of paper in your word processor and you want to turn it into a copyright-protected sound recording for release out into the world, stop by my webpage, www.thisislifesong.com. Leave me a comment on the contact page. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for watching.